The three most important things that you should look at before you buy your first or next rental property as an investment. That's going to be the topic of today's show, which is the real estate investing weekly lesson. If you're not familiar with me, my name's Greg Helbeck. I've been a full-time real estate entrepreneur now for almost 10 years. I've done well over 250 properties. I own 9 rentals right now. So if you get value from this video or podcast, however you're consuming it, if you could do me a favor and like the video on YouTube and subscribe to my channel, or if you're listening to this on an audio platform, if you can share this with some other people, would mean a lot to me. So today's topic is the 3 most important things you need to look at before you buy a rental property. And this is where I see a lot of conflicting advice out there. Some people tell you to buy in really expensive areas with not a lot of cash flow. Some people tell you to buy in the hood. And I think being able to kind of be in the happy medium is the way to go. So at the end of the day, I've really focused a lot since 2020 on buying the right rental properties. And these are the 3 things that I've came up with that really move the needle for me. And I think for a lot of other people who choose to be a long-term real estate buy and hold investor, AKA a landlord. So number 1, which is obvious, the location, right? Where you buy the property matters, and not necessarily the state, but really the metro area in that state. Usually that is, around a pretty big city or a decent sized city. So I'll give you an example. Location matters for me. I grew up in New York. I still go there a lot. My business is basically headquartered there. And the area in New York that I do investing in is a suburb of New York City, which is the largest city in America, pretty much the financial capital. So because of that, there's always a very strong demand for housing, right? The Hudson Valley, my market, is basically an hour from Manhattan and even closer to the Bronx. So if you need to commute to the city, it's not very far. And you're in an area where you don't feel like you're in New York City, but you're also super accessible. So because of that, the real estate prices are relatively expensive, and there's a lot of demand for people to buy there or rent there. So you're always going to have a very strong rental demand, and then you're always going to have a strong resale value / property value. So eventually, if you want to refinance or sell or whatever, you have a lot of demand for that product, whether it's condos, houses, doesn't really matter. If it's in the Hudson Valley, it's going to be desirable. So I like to buy in that location. I also live in Seattle. I would buy rentals here as well because there's a huge job market here. There's a lot of money up here. People want to live up here. There's no state income tax. So before you start picking your market to buy rentals, you got to do research on the area, right? I would rather buy in a good area and maybe get a little bit less of a good deal. Maybe you have to pay a little bit more, but in the long haul, that's going to really save you and make you more wealthy over time. And you're going to have better tenants. You're going to have more options. What happens if you live in a location that stinks? Let's say if you live in the middle of nowhere and there's no demand for housing in your spot. Well, you're going to have to go virtual at that point. You're going to have to pick a market that you think through some data and research and probably collaborating with others is a good market to invest in. So I'll tell you this, don't invest in like these cheap rundown areas where you can buy a duplex for $50,000 and rent it out for $1,000 a month combined. It looks good on paper, but the odds are if a piece of real estate is that cheap, there's probably a reason for that, right? There's, not a lot of demand or there's a lot of crime or whatever the case is. Usually those deals look good on paper, but when you actually perform them, they don't make any sense. Second lesson, you always want to buy the rental property, hopefully at a discount, right? And I'm going to say hopefully because it depends on where you're at, depends on your strategy. If you're not a direct marketer, if you're not doing seller marketing and getting off-market opportunities, it's going to be pretty hard to get a property at a discount. I'd recommend you do that. But if you're like, I don't want to do that, I want to buy off the MLS, try to buy the property at a discount off day one. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you're a real estate rental investor, unless you're going to own all your properties in cash, which is pretty rare unless you're coming in, with a lot of money, the more equity you can get in the form of buying it at a discount, the more options you're going to have on the other end of the deal, whether you're trying to refinance it or whatever. So if you can buy a house that's worth $300,000 for $200,000, you have $100,000 equity there. You're basically getting that equity for free. You're able to refinance. You're able to get private money. You're able to do a lot of different options. So remember this, the more equity you have in your rental portfolio, the more options you're going to have. It's going to be a lot easier to operate with equity because you can start using that equity to grow your portfolio. And if you can buy the real estate at a discount from day one, that's when you can truly do this thing called the BRRRR. I've made other videos on this where you basically take the capital you use for your first deal and just keep recycling the capital because you're getting this equity basically for free when you buy at a discount, and that allows you to grow. So Lesson number 2 is try your best to buy rentals at a discount because it's a lot easier to grow your portfolio. Lesson number 3 is you want to buy the right type of property, right? You don't want to buy a property that's going to cause consistent problems. So let me give you some examples. In the Hudson Valley, there's a lot of old houses, right? There's houses built in 1800, 1700, 1920. I don't really like to own rental property that's built before 1940 because there's going to be more maintenance calls. There's going to be more things that have to fix. There's going to be more things that can go wrong from an operational standpoint when you have an older property because it just needs more work. It's older. It's gotten beat up for a longer time. There's a lot of wear and tear. So if you're trying to manage that asset, it's always going to be a pain in the butt. But if you buy a property like in the Hudson Valley that's built in 1960 plus, which to people in Texas, that seems old, but in the Hudson Valley, that's like a new construction, in my opinion. You're going to be able to hopefully put the good amount of work into the property up front, and then you have less maintenance calls in the future. So try to avoid old properties, in my opinion. The second thing, when you're buying condos or maybe you're buying a mobile home in a park to rent out, you got to be careful on the property. Now, I'm not saying don't buy condos, but if you're buying a condo, you got to do some research on the HOA. Are they a good HOA? Are they financially stable? Some condos, you have to live there for 2 years before you rent it out. Some condos don't even want you to rent it out, right? So you got to do research on the actual property itself, right? You could buy in the best location. You could buy a property at a smoking hot discount. But if that property is built in 1920 and it's on a sinkhole, you're kind of screwed, right? You're always going to have problems with that property. So to summarize this video, if you're buying real estate, rental real estate, number 1, buy in a good location. Number 2, you got to buy at a discount if you can, because that gives you a lot more options. And number 3, you got to be picky on the kind of property you want to buy. Try to avoid these old properties if you can. And if you follow those 3 steps, you most likely will have more success in your rental property investing journey. So if you get value from this, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe. If you're listening, share the show with other people. And if you're in the Hudson Valley or Seattle or Delaware or Reno or San Diego, and you have a house you want to wholesale to me or wholesale with me, send me a DM on Instagram at Grego37 or send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com. I'll see you on the next REI deal breakdown. Take care.